This week on Induction Noise. I find a new hobby.
I sort of like to imagine in my mind that you went to a NASCAR race and walked through the pits at the end of the race and just picked stuff out of the rubbish bins.
I think our guest is Peppa Pig.
They can get it muddy and sticky.
And Andre explains why he's an expert.
I drive in an iRacing.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Induction Noise. I am Mr. Q. With me is Andre.
How's it?
Niku.
How's it?
And our guest this evening is none other than Mr. Gunter over here.
Hello.
And if you've ever been involved in any form of racing in Cape Town or South Africa, you probably know the man. So we're actually in your shop this evening.
That's right, yeah. My time, I spend my days and most nights sometimes here. So yeah, 24/7.
So we actually Gunter's guest. He's not our guest.
Yeah, actually, this is
but he's a
a
guest
little
on the
bit the
show.
wrong way around. So, I'm sorry to kind of have to spring this on you, but in order to get the podcast to flow the way we want it to, we kind of have to get a feel for personalities. So through lots of science and research, we have developed a very scientific personality test that we do on our guests, just to see how it goes. So let me just get the top trump cards out.
Do you know how to open it? Does your personality work to open it?
No. That's why I have an assistant. So the idea is, this kind of happened when we were in Neisner, and we were walking up and down the pits doing this with lots of famous people that we had no business talking to. And the idea is that you pick 3 cards out of the deck,
Right.
and you have to choose one that you're going to race, one that you're going to wreck or get rid of, and one that you want to own.
Okay. Sounds like fun.
Yeah. So, here we go. Here we go. For everyone on
Drum roll.
For everyone
Drum roll.
on Spotify, we'll just say what the cards is and whatever. All right.
Okay,
Choose
there we
any
go.
3
Pick
cards.
any 3 that you want.
Right. Let's do that, and I'll stick the one in the middle.
Here we go.
Cool.
All right. So you may obviously look at your
We
cards.
might take our cards
So tell the guys what you have here.
I
Okay,
have
so
a Koenigsegg, I have a McLaren, and I have a
BAC Mono.
BAC Mono. I have no idea what a BAC Mono actually is.
Sorry about all the crap cars. I mean,
Yeah.
So the BAC Mono is a, I think it's British built, isn't
it's
it?
like
Yeah,
it's a one-seater
It's a
road car.
single-seater track day road car.
It's not
it
British,
runs
are they?
Glorified aerial atom.
Yeah, it's basically
Yeah.
it's a
2.3
Formula 1
litre
version
Ford-
of your life.
Ford
Okay, so
motor.
that's a Ford motor. Okay, there we go. That's the one. That's the one we're gonna crash. Okay,
So we're
okay.
gonna wreck the BAC
We're
Mono.
gonna wreck the BAC, and we're left with the McLaren 12C, and we're left with the Koenigsegg. It's not too difficult because the one really is a race car, and the other one really is.
A road car.
Yeah, I was going to say road car, but the Camps Bay pick up on one goal. So there's a lot of McLarens around that does it. So the Koenigsegg would be the road car, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Okay.
McLarens, they are race cars, they are race car versions. So, yeah, make a great race
So
car.
race the McLaren,
Race
own
the
the Koenigsegg.
McLaren and the Koenigsegg. Yeah.
And let's just clarify for the Ford guy here, we are wrecking the BAC because of Ford. I'm just saying.
It has a Ford engine.
No, probably the one-seater thing. So
If it had an Alpha motor,
So that concludes this episode.
If it had a Chev motor, we would have taken it for sure.
absolutely, yeah.
So we've got Ford and Chev guys here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I always joke it. I always say I'm a chef guy through and through, but in reality, they are beautiful, beautiful Fords, classic cars, and the same with Chevs. And in both cases, they're bloody ugly ones as well.
So at
lemons in both cases. So
At the small midnight hours in the quiet of my bedroom, I can admit to myself that Ford make great cars, Chev make better engines.
Yeah.
Well, that's something interesting for me, and I'm kind of jumping the gun, but everyone on YouTube would probably see behind Gunter, he's got some NASCAR shirts and stuff that's there for sale. And with NASCAR, what is the motor per manufacturer, or do they have a single motor that everyone runs?
Per
'Cause I really don't know.
manufacturer. So
Is it?
it was Ford and Chev and Dodge all the years.
Okay.
Dodge pulled out. Toyota came in. Problem with Toyota was the rules are pushrod engine, 2-valve per cylinder, and Toyota have nothing of the sort. I mean, their technology
They
is...
phased them out in the 60s.
Exactly, yeah. So
The one you said is a bit advanced.
yes, so Toyota got a clean piece of paper, a clean slate, and they designed the NASCAR motor from scratch. Their own block, their own head, their own everything. And the first year or two, they got away with it, and Ford and Chev moaned and said, but why must we use OEM parts and these guys can use
Custom
all bespoke
things.
stuff?
Yeah.
So they've also gone that route
Okay.
to have bespoke engines.
Bespoke engines.
stuff.
So the whole idea of stock cars having like road-based engines is kind of out the window.
Completely.
All bespoke.
Completely, yeah.
And even though, sorry, we're going off on a complete tangent from what we originally said we were going
As
to.
these things do.
But for those that don't know, Gunter is pretty much the South African expert on NASCAR because you're very into that kind of racing.
yeah.
And quite a lot of the stuff that you guys bring in are ex-NASCAR parts, like these enormous brake calipers.
Calipers, yeah.
And there's a bit of a misconception that NASCAR is a bunch of hillbillies jerking each other off in a circle.
Not at all. Yeah,
It's
no,
a bit more sophisticated than that. Hi guys, and welcome back to the Induction Noise podcast. I am Mr. Q, and you join me in my recording studio where I'm currently sitting in the middle of the night, very tired, which is why I look the way I do, currently assembling, mastering the episode that you are currently listening to of the Induction Noise podcast. This episode is not sponsored by Gunter, but I feel that it is kind of appropriate to just say thanks to Gunter for hosting us at your shop and for showing us around, and obviously for spending the time to chat with us. I know time is valuable, and the fact that you take your time to chat to us about all kinds of nonsense is really appreciated. If you are at all into racing, you probably know G&A already. If you're getting into racing, please go and check them out. I know Gunter's running some crazy specials on packages for new racers, which includes racing boots, gloves, balaclava, and a suit. You can get a level 1 suit for $5,000 with all the other bits and pieces, or you can get a level 2 suit with all the other bits and pieces for $6,000, which, if you know what I'm talking about, it's actually really cheap. So it's worth your while checking out G&A to go and get yourself a new race suit or get started in racing. Our actual sponsor for this episode is our very own resident IT guy, Niku, and his company CodePure. CodePure is basically your one-stop shop for all your technology requirements. These guys can build your website. They can write software bespoke for your business. They can code in just about any language except maybe German. They can supply hardware. They can do support for your users and for your systems. They're experts in cloud computing. They are experts in new technologies like AI. And although Niku is very modest and he doesn't like mentioning this all the time, his company has just won like a whole bunch of awards for software and code that they've written and stuff that they've created that has just never been done before. So yeah, they really can do some pretty incredible stuff. Some other projects they've worked on, I think I've mentioned before that they built a custom dashboard display unit for the Harper sports cars. They built Neil's sim rig for his sim racing setup. So, what they can do is incredibly varied.
If you need anything to do with computers, technology, communications, cloud storage, backups, whatever, speak to Niku at CodePure, or if you want to get in touch with us, we can put you in touch with Niku. But yeah, thank you very much to CodePure for sponsoring this episode of Induction Noise. Let's get back to chatting with Gunter. He's probably more interesting than me anyway.
I mean, NASCAR's R&D department in America, in Charlotte, test more Formula One parts for F1 than they actually do NASCAR parts. So
wow.
They've got machinery and test equipment that no one in the world's got. So
But they've also got enormous budgets because, I mean,
teams. Oh, yes.
NASCAR
yes,
is, I think it's the most watched sport in America, isn't it?
No, it used to be, but it's not. Hence the big rule changes in 2021. So there was a little bit of a problem that crept in where the average viewership was 10 to 15 years older than any other mainstream sport. Your baseball, basketball.
So the
football.
guys are kind of aging out of it.
Yes, so they've gone and made bold steps. I mean, since the 50s, NASCAR had a 15-inch steel rim, 5 bolts or 5 lugs, as they would say, and they'd have a big sidewall tire, and that all changed in 2021. So they went to an 18-inch rim, low-profile tire, sequential gearbox. That's a transaxle. The gearbox sits at the back. It's a little carbon clutch. So
How many gears have they got now?
they got 6 gears, I think. It's the old boxes were 4. So it's really, if you see the modern NASCAR, it's basically an Australian touring car. It's a lot similar than you think of an old steel body NASCAR, composite bodies.
A different world.
Different world, yeah.
It
Carbon seats.
It sounds a lot like the V8s they used to race at Bathurst.
Yeah, the Australian,
the Australian supercars. Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, a guy like Shane van Gisbergen has come across and is loving NASCAR, but it's not that far different to what he was racing. So I mean, his first race was a Chicago street circuit. Nobody had raced there, and it was his first event and he won. So it was a big eye opener for the guys.
First event in a NASCAR, and he dominated.
And then all his wheels fell off around the oval, but it's something that you gotta learn, unfortunately. So,
In terms of horsepower, what are these cars making?
back in 2000, I think that it was either 2014 and 2017. I think 2014 they were making close to 900 horsepower. Then they changed. They went to fuel injection from carburetor, McLaren management systems. It's really, really high tech. They actually at one stage went down to 550 horsepower, but they're now at 670. That's the current. So yeah,
Sort of
and then
average.
there's all the modern changes was to entice a younger viewership. That's the idea. And also on the cards there's a fourth manufacturer coming in. There's lots of speculation of who it is. It seems to lean towards Honda. Honda's got a very big presence in IndyCar and a very big footprint in America.
And they compete with Toyota quite a bit in terms
They do. Toyota's still, I mean, people don't believe it. Toyota's the number one sold car in America. Above Ford and Chev,
You see them everywhere. You see Toyotas everywhere.
I think it was 1.9 million cars last year. New Toyotas ever sold.
It's about the same as the number of taxis in Cape Town.
That's the same, There was also talk about Kia and Hyundai, all these other manufacturers. But I think it's a good thing if another 1 or 2 days come in. It'll just
shake things up,
a bit and make it interesting. So, I mean, everyone sort of accepted Toyota now. The true grit, hardcore, old school NASCAR guys, they were a bit anti-Toyota. Like they were anti all the changes of the new cars, So. But these things unfortunately happen.
That's unfortunate with every motorsport. I mean, Formula One, once again, the same. The Formula One's gone from these fire-breathing...
Some changes are good and some changes are not necessarily... Like F1, I think they went the wrong way now for a long time. It looks like the 2026 rules are going to take us back to smaller cars. So,
but I think the thing with NASCAR is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the older guys are very sort of committed to the history of the sport and the origins and the fact 100%. That these guys were moonshine runners and basically booze smugglers during Prohibition. And
exactly that,
these other teams that are coming in now, they've got no sort of claim to that.
Sport outfits.
They've got no claim to that kind of heritage.
And there's that, if you talk to crew chiefs, famous crew chiefs that have now retired. There's a little bit of that in spiciness that's fallen away. They used to have those templates over the cars, which was introduced because of a guy like Smokey Unique who chopped cars and changed cars. Now they've got these green rooms where they put this car in this room and they scan the car.
They scan them, yeah.
You can't really crook anymore. You're not crook. You can't do these nifty little tricks, which was there's such nice stories about what guys did back in the day.
Sounds a bit like a Group N in South Africa.
100%, absolutely. Yeah.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gunter, we actually wanted to start off chatting. How did you get into racing? Because you've pretty much been doing this your whole life.
Yes, so my dad started racing before I was born. So he's one of the founder members of the K-Bell drivers.
You had no chance.
Even I think 12 or 17 guys, including the famous Jack Holloway, started the K-Bell drivers in 68. I think it was the 28th of September 1968 was the first race.
And we for the uninitiated, what exactly was that?
So the Cape Bell drivers was oval track stock car racing in Cape Town, and it was the famous Goodwood showgrounds. Yeah, it's the club, and they were actually world famous, And my dad was involved for all the years, raced, and being the PRO, brought 2 British teams out to come and race here. So I grew up in racing, and my dad's weekend friends was Chris Swanepoel and all these legends, So myself and Kwesi, we were 2 years old and playing dinky toys. You had no option but to, like my dad says, if you played golf, I would have probably played golf, So, but unfortunately not, So, and then I think I was about 10 years old, I started karting, doing go-kart racing.
Which these days is quite late. Right?
Which is quite late, yes.
Those days it was still, but these days, if you're 10 years old and you start very late.
It's very late, yeah. So, and it was also affordable, which is not the case so much anymore.
Definitely not.
And then I started karting. My dad actually raced in conjunction with me, and it became a bit of a problem because with certain times our race dates would clash, and I'd actually only end up doing 2 heats. And we'd have to go to Goodwood for him to race. And then at a certain point, he said, okay, it's either me or you, and you're getting a little bit better at this. Then he stopped, and I carried on. So, that's where the racing thing started from 10 years old.
And you did some regional racing and national racing and stuff with...
Karting, yes, yeah. So, in my day, it was Henry Groenewald, Stephen Watson, the Roosers, there was the Brat Pack those days was all big names in motorsport today, Van der Lindes and and then from there I raced we won't go into much detail. I did a karting national in P and I got my license taken away.
Your karting license?
Yeah, my karting license. So, and then it became a court of inquiry. But at that weekend, my dad decided to let's buy a race car. I was 17 years old.
Okay.
And then we actually ended up, it was just that turn before stuff got real big value, and we ended up buying the ex-Tony Pond Opel Ascano 400, which is a famous world rally car.
Yeah.
So we got that, we made it a circuit car, I raced it as a circuit car, regional racing, we turned it into a super saloon. And then, it was early 90s, we actually got offered a Group N drive. So they had a nice program, Class E Cup. Opel would give you a cup, Peter Led was the motorsport boss at the time, and
were they 1300s? At some point, they became 1400s.
Yes, There was a whole bunch of us, the guys that got picked, and we would get a car, and I think it was a 50,000 rand at the time. It was a lot of money, crash budget. So for fenders and as you would replace.
You needed that with the Opel Cup. Though.
Yes, and this is my one break that I thought, I'm going to become this factory driver, and then. The famous Michael Briggs Opel Calibra's budget went from $1 million to I think it was 2.5 million.
No more money for
and
that.
They had to find the money somewhere, and they said, okay, no more Cubs, So all got revoked, So and then we did some. From there up, I did a Polo Cup race in Zimbabwe with Henry Groenewald.
That's cool.
Which was very fun. And then various endurance races, classic car racing. I got an old Chevy with a V8
I raced against you with the Chevy in fine cars.
Fine cars, yes, yeah.
So it's the 2-door, it's the Chevy, the
4.1 was renowned
Yes,
old
yes.
Chevy, but it's just a
what
2-door
was
left and right.
wasn't the Commodore? It was the
Called an Opel Commodore in Germany, yes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I also owned the Toyota Class C Westbank car,
that was beautiful
which
car.
is a great car.
Was that the Repsol one or was it the other?
No, it was the other one. So
Okay.
it was originally Serge Damso rode it, Steve Wyndham drove it, Anthony Taylor drove it, and Charles Wilkin was the last.
And that was a
very
fully
successful.
modified, still front-wheel drive?
Front-wheel
But fully
drive.
modified wide arches.
Arches, yeah, absolutely.
You know, modified. And was it
It's
still
amazing.
it's normally aspirated 1600?
So yeah, stroke to 1700 and
Okay.
something cc, and I owned it from 96 to 98. And I mean, compared to today's times, it was amazing how fast that car was. Because even me, I used to do a 19 in the car.
Oh, wow.
I think Wyndham back in his day qualified in a late 17 or early 18. I mean, that car was unbelievably fast.
Those are the times that very recently the GTC cars were doing.
Yeah, it was a 1700cc engine. Okay, it had a great gearbox. It was 27 gear changes, one lap around Killarney. So every lap you could do 20. So go back to first gear, and then you come up to sixth gear, then back again.
Probably also revved
Tall
to
first, and then everything sort of stacked up quite close.
Stacked up,
Very
yeah. So
close
it had a
ratio.
very small power band, but the gearbox allowed it to stay in that power band. And it was another one of those genius cars that Roger Taylor was very involved in. So I mean, it had the most bizarre stuff. It had the dry sump tank in the boot had an element of a kettle in.
What?
With a 3-prong
What?
plug. So you put the plug in the wall, you
heat
switch
it
it
up.
on like you would want to get your
heat up
kettle
the
on,
oil.
or you heat up your oil.
That's actually brilliant.
brilliant, brilliant. So, yeah.
That is brilliant.
Yeah. So, and that car, of all places, ended up in Trinidad. A guy from
My
Trinidad
goodness.
bought the car in the West Indies. Yeah.
And does he race? Is there
Yes.
some race? Is there a race circuit?
His first question to me was, but before faxes and phone calls, he said, "Do you guys race in South Africa?" And I said, "That's rich coming from you from
You race in
Trinidad." And but apparently Trinidad and Tobago, all those islands at least each island has a racetrack on it.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. And it was a very funny story because he actually inquired about the gearbox. He only wanted to buy the gearbox initially, and as we got chatting, I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" He said, "Well, it's got two 300 horsepower, 300 and a 320 horsepower Graham Good built Cosworth engine,
Wow.
4-cylinder Cosworth, and his next step is to buy the gearbox, and then he's going to figure out to build the car." So I said, you pay the money of the gearbox is so much of the total car's value.
Yeah.
Just buy the car,
Yeah, and you get a gearbox.
And he said, "Okay, that's a good idea." And he bought the car, and I made a video, a good old video recorder. And I said, "Okay, this is what you do. You guys on sea level, don't change the cam timing, don't change the ignition timing, don't change the jetting. It's perfect." Roger Taylor did it. It's spot on. And he got the car. He tested the car. He phoned me. He said, "It's unbelievable. This car's amazing. The way it handles and brakes."
Wow.
And about 2 months later, he called me and said, "Any idea where you get 2 pistons and 3 valves?" And I said, "What did you do?" "No,
Too much
well,
fun.
we turn the ignition timing. We changed the jetting.
Why did
Everything
you change it?
that they were looking for a little bit more power." And I said to him, "Well, it's all TRD. You're a lot closer to America than me.
Yeah.
Give them a buzz and get
Get it
parts,
from there.
And I think 6 months went past, and I phoned him one day, and I said, "You get the car sorted?" He said, "I'm winning everything. Nothing beats me." And I said, "Well, you get the parts?" He said, "Oh, no, I put the 300 horsepower Ford engine in it."
Oh my goodness.
And at the end of the
What a
day,
Frankenstein.
at the end of the day, that car could have, it handles so well and it brakes so well. Another 100 horsepower or 80 kilowatt would have suited it
Been a
perfectly. So
really
it makes
serious
sense that
car.
it would have been a serious car. So
Wow.
hats off to him for.
Very cool.
Well, it seems that there's a bit of a boermaker plan kind of
Same attitude as
there.
us, yes,
It's
yeah,
like,
like
hey,
the
let's put
same
a Cosy
thing,
in it.
If not, why not?
Yeah, and then I've been very fortunate to have some endurance racing with my good friend Greg Mills, who owns a treasure trove of race cars, and he's got a couple of Janetta sports cars.
And that's the Le Mans.
GT4 and GT3
Yes,
cars,
yes.
and also he had a couple of other cars. He had I'm just trying to think of the name. I shared a car with. We entered one race with Eddie Kaizen.
all
And then
these big
I've
names.
raced with myself and Greg and Sorrel and Amava raced together, which is just a absolute bucket list thing to.
That is amazing.
And we won our class, but I mean, just to
That
ride
is
with
so cool.
Sorrel, So it's just he's just such a such an iconic guy and a fun guy, you know. So, and I've been the crew chief for a couple of races where he's done endurance racing, and I managed to race with him as a driver as well.
That's very cool.
So that box has been ticked. You know,
and I believe you also had some with the same car and with the Genettas. You also had some Formula One drivers.
Yes, yeah, we've had the Perez, the Emanuele, and his boys came to race the car, and then Jan Lammers has been. I think Jan's been in the car probably 6 or 7 endurance. He loves South Africa. He actually knows Sarel well. They get on well.
They are normally teammates.
Because they actually raced Le Mans in the 80s together.
Yes.
So they know each other from there. And as Jan says, we can skin it in Afrikaans. Nobody understands. But I mean, Jan is just another. He's done up to 2 years ago. I think he's done 24-hour Le Mans races.
Oh wow!
And he's at every position from 1st till 10th.
Oh wow,
that's something, including the famous, I think it was 86 or 87 or 88, I can't remember where they won, and he did 13 of the 24 hours.
So now the question becomes, in the next race, is he aiming to win or is he aiming for 11th?
I
want to complete the grid.
Yeah, I think he's done now with Le Mans. I think Le Mans also gotten, so, it's just developed into this. Again, there's a whole electric side to it.
And the
next
entry
level,
and money, I think, is also becoming silly.
But Jan had these amazing stories. He one of the trips we raced at endurance racing camp, and he ended up staying with me for a week at my house. So every night we'd have dinner, and I just listen to these stories. You'd have to pull it out of him because he's just such a reserved guy, But I mean, he raced Formula One. He raced the Theodore and a couple of cars. And he's interesting, the record still to this day stands where he's had the biggest break from racing a Formula One car to not racing a Formula One car and then in it again. It was 10 years. It was a decade. And
out of it and back in.
Yes, and the irony is when he got back was his best qualifying ever.
He was more competitive when he got back.
Yes, and the reason being in that era, he had raced for Toyota, for Jag, various Porsche Group C sports cars. And some of those cars were quicker because of the aero, their horsepower.
So your reflexes and your
so he never
skills.
lost the touch of Formula One because what he was driving in between was just unbelievable.
Actually practicing in faster cars than Formula One.
Absolutely, yeah.
But what is interesting for me is you're mentioning something that you don't really see anymore, which is all these top drivers who used to back in the day drive about anything with wheels. Right, if you look at even Sarel van der Merwe, he did all of those stuff, plus he did rally driving. If I'm not mistaken, he went overseas to do
11 times South African rally champion.
Yes, and he did some
Renema rally. He won in America.
I mean, he was in the big time in IMSA. I mean, when Daytona 24 hours,
in 84,
they were leading Le Mans, and then there was the thing.
Where today you just see the kids go from karting to single-seater, and that's about that, which is actually quite sad, because a lot of the oaks that I see like that drops out of Formula One, I've always thought, like, if you just maybe tried a bit of tin-top racing, or if you tried a bit of you might have actually maybe been a bit more successful.
But I think one of the big problems here is it's the professional. Well, it's not. It is what it is, right? The professionalism. It's a reality. It's for safety and it's for all these things. But sometimes you miss kind of that old way of, like you said, karting used to be cheap. Now it's and we understand there's some good reasons for it, and things need to be equal and all these nice things. But it used to be. I mean, we were talking about a Formula One driver, a British guy that died racing Formula 2, a champion.
Jim Clark.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Jim Clark raced. He raced touring cars. He raced Formula 1, Formula 2, all at the same time. He died in a Formula 2 car. He didn't die in a Formula 1 car.
100%.
And I mean, you would at the same weekend you do 3 races. Where would you see a Lewis Hamilton or a Max Verstappen or a whoever do that? And I think the one thing is it's become so serious, and so I mean the differences between the cars, if you 0.01 slower than you third instead of first. So that the tolerance has gotten smaller, but also it's become such an expensive thing. Max Verstappen is worth what does he get paid now? $60 million a year, or £60 million a year, whatever it is. It's So they can't risk a Formula One driver,
getting hurt.
Leclerc doing Le Mans or something, because if you get hurt and you break your hand or you break a leg, it's millions and millions of pounds that they
But
lose.
that's the thing. It's not about the racing anymore. It's a business.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And they have to run it like a business
Yeah.
because of the amounts of money that are involved.
Well,
In fairness, you
but,
always have to run racing like a business, but it's become a multinational, millions of dollars kind of business.
Well, and the versatility of the guys, what you're saying is that's gone.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you had guys that would do, Clark is a classic example. He was a Formula One driver, but he'd race a Lotus Cortina.
Yeah.
And then on Sunday, Bob Althoff raced at Cortina in the UK, and they were teammates.
Yeah.
And he told me the story. They went on a Sunday to have a picnic, barbecue, whatever, in the UK somewhere. And there was guys with motocross bikes that couldn't get across this wet marsh. And, Bob had a go and everyone had a go. These were motocross races.
Yeah.
And somebody said to Jim, have a go. And he went across and he came back. And they went, how the
It's
hell?
just that raw talent.
Yeah.
Anything with wheels.
With wheels, yeah. So, but these guys tried and rode everything, So, and that's where America tends to be more lenient with that. You go to a Formula One race and the drivers walk out of a meeting and they see a crowd of people, immediately turn away.
Yeah.
Because the NASCAR drivers see a crowd of people and walk straight to them.
They go for them.
And they go sign autographs,
Yeah.
So I guess they know who's
money
paying the
comes
bills,
from.
So and the spectator count and merchandise and that kind of thing is such a big factor,
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I sometimes wonder, it's almost sad because I think someone like a Max Verstappen, the car control that guy is, I think if you put him in anything and you give him a bit of practice, I think Max will drive the wheels of anything with the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And many of the other drivers possibly as well. Like
well,
Alonso has proved, right? I mean, Alonso put him in an off-road
Stroll would
buggy.
also drive the wheels off anything,
Yes,
but
but
for
not in a good
different
way.
reasons.
But so we know Alonso is that versatile.
Yeah.
But I think there's many of the other guys that are frustrated.
Yeah.
That are, I would love to do Le Mans. I'd love to do rallying. I'd love to do.
I think listening to people that name, I think Max is there. Max is that guy. We were chatting earlier with Shane Ginsburg winning the race. When he got the very first phone call, he got it from Max.
Oh, wow.
Congratulating him because Max is a massive Australian touring car fan.
Okay.
And
He
I
loves to do that.
don't know, he's got 4 championships now. I don't think Max is the guy that's going to sit it out to try and
Get 10 championships. No.
beat Lewis's
No.
7 or 8 or whatever. I don't think Max is going to be that long in Formula One. Great, it pays bills.
Yeah.
He makes you a lot of money. But I think Max is going to be the guy that's going to go do Le Mans. It's going to do Bathurst. It's going to go do Rolex 24-hour.
100%.
He'll ever go with NASCAR. He'll try and do anything.
Absolutely.
And I think you guys might not know a couple of months ago, this whole story with Kyle Larson, where he
Where he said he's a better driver than Max
yes,
Verstappen.
Kyle Larson is such a reserve guy.
It was probably
came
like
out
just
wrong.
misquoted.
Was misquoted, and he basically said that he thinks he'll be better at more different things than Max. And the Americans obviously had it went like wildfire.
Yeah.
But I think Max would get into a sprint car and a midget and it would take him a while to
Be a
get
learning
the hang of
curve,
it.
but give him the basics and a
He'll
bit of practice,
figure it
and he'll
out.
be.
But I think Larson will be quick in Formula One. I really
think
do.
so.
And they're putting a test together. And why I say that is, it was such a weird thing. Jimmy Johnson, a decade ago, got into Alonso's car around Bahrain. He was 0.2 slower. Here's a guy that's only raced NASCAR and in his height and was 0.2 slower than Alonso, who can drive.
I think the thing that people miss, and once again about NASCAR, and correct me if I'm wrong again, and you kind of touched on it a bit earlier, is NASCAR is not just oval. There is circle tracks.
So these days they do road
courses. Yeah. If you look, you guys can't see now, but if you look at Pocono, which is a triangle, every track is so different. From half mile to super speedways, which are 2.5 miles.
Yeah.
And they're all completely different shapes. So there's nothing you can take from one track to the
other. But they've got
other.
actual road circuits with left and right turns and stuff.
And more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
Also, if you go and look at the guys in a NASCAR whilst they're driving, it's not just wheel straight, wheel turn, wheel straight, wheel turn. That thing's constantly going sideways.
Yeah, they're on the edge all the time.
I mean, it's a monster to manhandle in the first place because it's got stupid horsepower and it's quite heavy compared to other race cars. And then, I mean, with the horsepower they've got and the fact that they're going at 200 miles an hour around corners, they are going sideways all the time.
Yeah. No, it's very impressive. If you watch a NASCAR race live, it's an absolute.
So, from that, you would assume that NASCAR drivers have pretty damn decent car control because to be able to do that for the number of laps that they're doing,
absolutely,
it takes some doing. Gunter, how did you get from racing karts to not really racing anymore, but eventually sort of going into business in the racing world rather than focusing on the racing itself?
I was still racing quite seriously, but what happened was I went from karting to this Ascona 400 saloon car, and I needed to buy myself a race suit. So those days, this was late 80s. The place to go to was AutoCoop in Cape Town. And
still my favorite livery.
Yeah,
black with the red and the yellow stripes.
Yeah.
Wasn't that it was the Moore Jag XJ6
100%
in super
the same colours, And the guy there, Johnny Aruja, was sort of second in charge of AutoCoop, and he works for Toby Fenter at Porsche. He's a great friend of mine as well. And I'd just known Johnny briefly, and he said, listen, there's a big problem there. There's an office with a mountain of suits. Go in the office, lock the door, and start trying suits on. He says, because the small is bigger than an extra large, and the double XL is the same size. He says it's a complete nightmare.
It's an Italian that made it with some.
It's all wrong, And I did exactly that, and everything was funny sized. And in the corner was a big box. I mean, probably meter by meter by meter, big brown box standing with pieces of fabric, loose pieces of fabric on top of the box. And I just got this brainwave, and I had a friend who owned a clothing factory. So I went there, I said to Johnny, nothing fits. Can I buy that box of fabric and then I can make myself a suit? And he said, make me an offer I can't refuse. And I said, okay, $500. He said, the box is yours. And I took the box and loaded it in the back of my bucky, got back to my office, and it was about 30 centimeters of fabric, and the whole rest of the box was complete suits. That had been made up. And I started selling suits to everyone at Kalani. I think Louis Pell was my first customer. And I thought, geez, this is cool. And then I started doing homework as to where to get fabric, and bought a sewing machine, at home, and we started the business. My dad and myself started the business basically from out of the garage, so to speak.
Quite literally out of a box.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I've bought 2 suits from you. I've bought boots from you. I've bought gloves from you. When I started racing in 2008, I spoke to the guys from the Alpha Club, old Paulo and Lorenzo Farella. Lorenzo said, go to Gunter, he'll sort you. And I'm like, who's Gunter? No, go to Gunter. It's the Imparo, just go to him. Send me the thing. And I got here. And that's when I met Gunter. And we've got to become friends over the years. Because we're both passionate about racing. And you like, buy this. You don't have to buy this. You can try this. Like, just giving me advice. And that's one thing that I always, kind of appreciated of you, is you're always trying to get more people into the sport. You're always passionate about,
It's so expensive that you're trying, and this is where, people come in and they, I don't want to upsell a guy, with the most expensive pair of boots, and especially if it's a budget race. And unfortunately in South Africa, there's this big pyramid. You've got loads of people who aren't really supposed to be racing. They can't really afford it.
Yes.
And it gets less and less the more, and then there are those guys that want, fancy this and fancy that. But they're few and far between, So you've got to cater for the masses. And then that's how the thing started. My first customer was AutoCoop. So I fixed their previous supplier that had a problem, and we started supplying them. So they were to this day, which has now become First Race. My 2 biggest customers is still First Race, and ATS, which is the 2 big guys up north. And the bulk of the suits we make still goes up the racing is just a little bit bigger
There's
more
a
tracks,
bit more money and more
money,
tracks and more everything.
more
in
options, So yeah.
And what is interesting is you kind of still keep into that vibe of going out and getting a deal and making sure and kind of helping people get these type of parts that no one gets, like with the NASCAR, the NASCAR pads and the NASCAR calipers and whatever. Because
it's kind of stuff that's been discarded or that's being like, oh, we've now used it. It's not new anymore. And you're like, well, you know what? For someone in Cape Town racing a Clubman's Golf
100%.
or racing a Lemons 9-hour car, or myself like a sports car or a Supra, whatever, there is NASCAR brake pads.
Parts, yeah.
I've got a few sets of those.
There's a couple of things on a NASCAR when they tear them, they strip them or tear them down after every race. The NACA ducts, the vents that goes in, the calipers. Calipers is tricky because you don't always get them. The brake pads.
You'll need to find wheels big enough to fit these calipers in.
And there's brake ducts, switches, steering wheels. There's some parts that's, it's just a generic part that works on any race car.
Yeah.
So most of the NASCAR stuff is unfortunately a bit bespoke. But yeah, there is lots of stuff that does work. That whole market's also, you've almost got to mold yourself around because you'll get there and then, the clutches we really had clutches, radiators and the brakes. The clutches was a very big thing. And then you'll get there and then suddenly there's no clutches. But
somebody else could win them.
There's 2 40-foot containers full of radiators. And they've changed the rule that the radiators maybe instead of 800, it's now going to be 780. But they made
800s are.
they can't use them, So suddenly
these
they
are
get
top
sold.
quality. I mean, these are some of the best radiators you can buy.
Well, in terms of radiators, the guy from PWR is the biggest radiator specialist race car manufacturer in the world in Australia. So they do all Formula One. They do IndyCar, Rallycross, all top forms of motorsport and NASCAR. And I actually met the guy. He was at one of the teams, at one of the 4 teams there. And we started chatting, and I was telling him what I do with the radiators, and he was intrigued that we sell a used radiator, And then I asked him the question. I said, how involved is a Formula One's radiator? Because, I've got this guy. And he looked at me and he said, compared to? So I said, well, compared to, say, NASCAR. And he said, it's very easy. He says, Formula One is like a Model T Ford. Compared to these idiots, he says, because they give me grey hairs. He said NASCAR is next level with tricks and some of the radiators have little pipes in the fins, and some of the teams have on certain parts of the radiators they want the fins of the radiator angled. For downforce.
Yeah.
Now, like he says, might make only 0.0001
That's all you
per
need.
second, but to do that 50 times, you got a 0.1. So the NASCAR guys just go that extra mile.
So how did that happen? Because I sort of like to imagine in my mind that you went to a NASCAR race and walked through the pits at the end of the race and just picked stuff out of the rubbish bins, but it's a bit more sophisticated.
It's a little bit more.
It's like after the karting race, everybody's picking tires out.
It's a little bit more involved in that. So I think it was about 2009. I went to Charlotte, which is NASCAR, the Charlotte area, North Carolina. About 80% of the teams are within a
It's the heart of
20-mile radius.
It's basically a town that exists for no other reason other than NASCAR.
Yes.
If you watch Days of Thunder, the movie with Tom Cruise, a lot of it.
What do you mean?
Is around.
Every time I can show you pictures of my phone. Every time I stop at the barn has now officially been deemed a historical site, and I'm not going to break it down.
Awesome.
Every time I get there, a piece of wood has fallen, but the barn where the car is, that's still standing there.
Love it.
It's about 2 miles from my hotel where I always stay.
Awesome.
So and they've got industrial areas there where you walk in there and it's just correlated. So there's a trailer builder, there's Simpson World Race Gear, there's 2 NASCAR teams, the Bassett Wheels,
everything's bigger.
Motec, So it's just next level. And then I went there and then I met the guys from, it was called Roush Yates.
Oh, yes.
They sold used NASCAR parts, and I started befriending the guy, and was fortunate enough to meet Doug Yates, and we had a tour of their facility.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then it's strange because, especially with my son now being there, for the last 15 years, I've been going back to the same town a couple of times a year, and you end up you self-educate, I guess. You know,
Yeah.
you got
to
a
know
very good
who's-
friend, and he introduces you to someone, and you and that guy end up becoming the best of friends, and he knows someone, and then
Yeah.
you know, it sort of branches out like life, I guess. But I've got this another little life over there. You know, I know the town like the back of my hand.
That's cool.
And it's just great. You know, so and you start dealing with teams direct. You know, meeting Dale Earnhardt Jr. and you deal with the team.
That's very cool.
And these Americans, I must say, even these famous guys, they're cool cats. You know, they're down to earth.
That's very cool.
But that's something I've heard quite a lot said about NASCARs, that it's one of the biggest forms of motorsport where fans still have genuine access to their heroes.
do.
You can still go up to the guy and shake his hand. It's not
Absolutely,
like us and them kind of vibe. It's very much we're here to have fun and put on a show.
Yeah.
It's
that happens
quite
all
cool.
the time. You'll see them, the guys walking around in the shops. You'll see them at local dirt races, or their kids are karting, and they're approachable. You know, so and it's strange. Nobody seems to, because of their being approachable and always in your, you see them all over.
Yeah.
You know, nobody goes up to them and pesters them. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, when my son races, all the NASCAR drivers race as well, the local dirt track, and you'll find one of the guys will walk to concession stand or whatever, a fan will walk next to him and take a selfie, but never, you know, stop
your
the guy
face,
dead
yeah.
and just ask him a million questions, you know.
Yeah.
So the fans also are
Kind of a mutual respect.
yeah, it's a mutual respect, you know.
That's
So
cool.
yeah.
And it seems to me kind of like, if I listen to what you kind of mentioned now, racing is kind of like an alpha. It's a sickness, right? Because from the sounds of it, it sounds like you infected your son with the sickness.
You
and-
inherited it from your dad, and now you're
Yeah,
passing it
but
on
it's
to
getting worse as we're going along. Yeah,
sins
yeah.
of the father.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so he's also very involved.
And
you
your
know.
son, and Luke is now he's now based in America. and
Yes,
racing.
yeah. So yeah, he's in South Africa at the moment and about to head back in a week's time. So he races two things. He races a micro, which is a dirt car with a motorbike engine, and then a midget. And both their call it Super Bowls are happening at the end of the year. Dirt racing in America kind of stops in November. It kind of starts early March, end of February. So there's that window where nothing happens except this freaking big race that happens in Oklahoma, which messes our whole plan up for you in terms of traveling and coming
You can't
back.
rest, you have to.
Yes, you've got to be back there. And the reason why they have it there is it's inside a stadium. It's the biggest indoor building in America. So, it's the Tulsa shootout for the micro starts the 30th of December and ends the 4th of January. It's a week long. And then there's a week gap, which they re-prepare the track.
Big New Year's party there. With
Yeah, they do. And then there's the Chili Bowl, which is a very famous midget race, which every NASCAR driver, IndyCar driver, they're all there, you know. So and that happens the 12th till the 18th of January. I think he's going to be the first South African to ever to race the Chili Bowl. You know,
So I read a little bit about the racing that Luke is doing in America, and one of the things that sort of struck me is the fact that they're driving really quite high-powered cars on a surface that really doesn't respond well to having that amount of power applied to it, and they don't really have practice time, do they?
No, they don't. No. But the circuit thing is interesting because they are most times quicker around dirt than they will be on tar by a lot, because tar, or as the Americans say, asphalt, you know, has a percentage of grip, and that's it. Mm-hmm. But that track in America, they can get it muddy and sticky that it'll bike up. The guys they can flip the car backwards from having too much grip.
So they actually make it sticky,
sticky. Absolutely. There's some tracks where you can't really get on the gas all the way because it just keeps on lifting the nose. So you've got a super sticky tire with a super sticky surface, you know.
And the surface completely changes throughout the race as well. So there's no sort of getting used to it or learning your lines and sticking to it.
No.
You've got to completely evolve every lap that you go around.
Absolutely. So that's my son, as he says, he says a tar road is to get to a dirt track. It's all tar's good for. and that's where it works well with you've got to work well with your crew chief because, you know, like a final, their feature, as they call it, a feature will be anything from 30 to 50 laps. And now you've got to, with your crew chief, guess what the track is going to do. You know, it might be now the bottom is at the moment working. but by lap 10 or 15, the top's going to come in or the middle's going to come in. So you've got to set your car up for what you think the bulk of the laps is going to do, and possibly towards the end.
And again, there's no chance for testing your setup. You kind of dial it in and just
Well, you're not going to test because it's a different track 10 laps later, right?
100%. So yeah, the Extreme Midget Series this year was 30 races at 22 different tracks in about a 5-month period.
Wow.
So, and with my son barring the one track, you get to a track, and anything from just over 200 meters to 800 meters. So he gets to a track and he goes, oh my goodness, look at this, the length of this thing. And then they give you hot laps, which is 5 laps to go around.
Get acquainted.
And then the next thing is 2 laps qualifying. That's it. So it's kind of jumping the deep end.
And it's 2 laps qualifying with a full grid of guys.
No, you go out in batches of, I think it's 4 or 5 at a time. And then they'll do elimination heats and get points. And then the feature is 24 cars. Some of the tracks can't take 24 cars.
24 cars on a relatively tight space, on a completely changeable surface with lots of horsepower. The attrition rate, I imagine, is above average.
Yeah. It is, yeah.
Action is sure to follow.
Action, and because they're light, the midgets are about 400 kilograms with a driver, and the car makes 420 horsepower. So it's hectic,
It's almost 1-to-1.
That's
crazy.
A little over 1-to-1. So and the finals, with amount of cars, you've got to guess the setup, you've got to try and get it right, and then you've got to be ballsy. You've got to take risks, take chances. It sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't work. So that's just one of those
30
things.
30 races to figure it out.
Yeah. So it's different. What's interesting about the American racing compared to our, I've got to be very careful here how I say this, with our club racing, you get to a racetrack and there's 60 midgets or 100 sprint cars. They're all the same. They're all the same. There's no slow car and a fast car. So because Americans are in dollars, they can afford it. A blue collar worker can race an entry level type race car. So you get to a racetrack. Unfortunately, the ball is in your court as a driver.
Yeah,
and that's where I think that's what rises to the top and makes drivers way better competing in an environment with equal equipment.
Super competitive,
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough. It's really, really tough. And I haven't quite gotten my head around it. My son has fortunately figured it out. Is just because I'm not used to it, there's no thing as fun or enjoyment. There's no fun in it. It's a job. It's a task. So it's not,
it's nice. We're doing something.
No,
else.
I mean you'll sign a contract for a team or whatever, and the next thing you get is a race schedule. That's the dates and that's the tracks. And from the team side of that is it. That's what they give you. How you get to the track, where you stay in the middle of Ohio, Illinois, wherever you are, it's not the team's problem. And if you think about it, it shouldn't be because they are there to work on race cars. So that's the race date. Racing starts at 6 o'clock. You've got to be there at 5.
Yeah.
You get there. Our first race, we got there at 2, and everybody looked at us. What are you guys doing here? You don't have to be. You in the way,
Yeah.
And the driver's the driver. He's got a lounge area. He gets dressed. He goes out. He comes back. He tells his crew chief, his guys, what's wrong.
Yeah.
He doesn't say, do this, do that. That's not his job.
He tells them the symptoms and they
and then go back to your lounge area, put your AirPods in, and we'll call you when it's qualifying.
You're a hired hand. You're here to race. Don't tell us what to do.
And the difficult thing is,
it's weird.
We most racing in South Africa is, you race on the weekend and then Monday you're back to your normal job.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't happen. The crew, those teams, their normal job is back
Prepping
to
the car.
tear the car down, as I say, rebuild it, and be ready and fresh for the next race.
The level of professionality is just on a different level.
Absolutely next level.
And that is talking about that's dirt ovals. That's not even, you're not even talking about NASCAR or IndyCar or anything like that.
So the dirt ovals with the micros, the micros is almost bigger at the moment. There's a whole shift because all the NASCAR, so there was only one team, which was Joe Gibbs Racing, was the only team owner which didn't allow or didn't want his drivers to go race dirt. Okay. That has just changed 2 months ago. So Christopher Bell and his grandson Ty Gibbs, they all go dirt racing now because it keeps you so sharp. But the focus is definitely on micros with the bike engine. So, and all of it,
what kind of engines do they have?
The bike engine, 600cc Yamaha, Yamaha engine. So, but they are super good. They only weigh 280 kilograms without the driver. So some tracks are actually quicker.
It's basically a go-kart, oversized
Absolutely,
go-kart. It's a hyper kart.
So the NASCAR teams has a lot of focus and a lot of investors. Toyota specifically, Chev is really getting on board now where they actually own these micros. And they own,
to get the drivers through.
And they'll put their NASCAR drivers they'll put in there to keep sharp. And then there's guys that are scouting for talent. If somebody really good, then they'll pick you.
That's something I was quite curious about because obviously we've got karting and Formula One goes hand on hand. All the talent for Formula One comes from karting. Where does the NASCAR talent kind of come from?
Dirt.
Is it from dirt?
Karting and then dirt.
It comes from, definitely does come from dirt. There's also a slight shift now where because of what you were talking about earlier, the road courses, the cars have become so technical and call it proper sophisticated race cars that, I mean, where my son lives, their local track, early in October, Shane van Ginsberg and Carl Larson were practicing with a KZ card, which is a D2, a little bit quicker.
It's like a six-speed shifter card.
Shifter, yes, and we've actually, my son's actually just gotten one as well because that's now become the new tool to keep your sensor sharp.
Yeah. Well, that's what the Formula One drivers
absolutely,
keep these sensors.
So the two of them were practicing in the week. They were out twice that week, and the Saturday was the Charlotte, the famous Roval race, which is half an oval and then the circuit. And
I drive it on iRacing.
and then the grid came out, the qualifying grid, Larson on pole, Shane van Ginsberg second. So the karting definitely has an effect on it.
That's very cool. But it's interesting what you're saying. They now actually have to get serious about road training.
Yes, about there's much more on the schedule.
About the finer kind of, because I mean, it's, the oval thing, it's different, right?
Completely.
You need to wrestle the car in one way and keep it there, which is a skill on itself. Like you said, Shane had some trouble with that.
Yes, it's just different. You have to get used to it.
But you're not used to driving a car and, controlling it in different
directions. The problem with the circuit race is that there's a tendency to really go deep into a corner and brake super hard. And that's exactly what doesn't happen on oval. It's braking as little as possible and mid-corner rolling the car momentum as much. That's a bit of a mind shift for a traditional circuit racer. And the other thing is the new NASCAR drivers most of them are in their 20s or early 30s, and they guys weigh 50 and 60 kilograms, They know more of these big old Southerners, smoking with the open face helmets,
with the cowboy hats in the pits. And
absolutely,
you still see a few of those around, but
the spectators, especially and some of the smaller dirt tracks, you definitely see sort of traditional.
There was a series, kind of the NASCAR version of the Drive to Survive that was on. I think it was on Prime or it was on. I don't think it was on Netflix, but on one
YouTube.
of these. It was on one of the streaming channels where they talk to some of the NASCAR, like the modern NASCAR drivers. They kind of follow them around, and one of the guys, he's one of the top drivers. He came from sim racing.
Yes, William Byron,
Yes. And he won some big things, and he's from sim racing.
He's from sim,
So, which is quite interesting because, we've...
It's become a big part of my son's housemate, Canon McIntosh. He's a Toyota midget driver. He actually won the championship. And they go to TPC every morning, which is Toyota Performance Center. There's a gym, there's a nutritionist, there's a doctor, and they've got these really quick sims that they practice.
But it's interesting. It almost feels to me like, talking about going through the motions and doing the things, because karting has become expensive. If you want to do it properly, you can go do some clubman's karting, which is not really cheap, but it's okay. But it doesn't give you that same level of competition of kind of regional, national karting and stuff. So it almost there's a bit of a shift where it's almost sim racing has become something that is accessible to, not that that's very cheap, but it's accessible to people a working man's kids,
Right.
you
The
know,
thing
a
with-
blue collar kind of guy's kids, where karting's just outside of reach.
The big thing with sim racing is that you can spend as much on a sim rig as you would on a race car or a kart,
But you do it once.
but you do it once. There's no maintenance cost.
And
You
look,
buy it once,
I
and
mean-
the tires are digital. You know.
I've done it on both sides. I mean, I've done kart racing, national. I've done club racing, regional stuff. I've done and I've done quite a bit of sim racing. So I know you can't compare the two, right? I mean, what I'm trying to say is because of the budget factor, for some folks, it's the only way for them to get into some form of racing.
Yeah.
And if you look at guys like David Perel, he got into with a whole lot of grafting and other things as well. But I mean, he did thousands and thousands of laps in GT3 cars and stuff. When he eventually got the chance, he kind of shined. He was a proper driver. And he's now, I'm not sure if it's still the case, I know a few years ago, he is the FIA's ambassador for sim racing.
Really?
David Perel, yeah. South African.
Gunter, you're obviously well invested in the racing sort of market. So obviously you must see a future in racing in South Africa. Where do you see that future going? I mean, what's the motorsport that's going to be growing in South Africa that people are getting excited about and sort of getting into now? Because obviously, as Andre says, there's budget concerns and all kinds of stuff. What do you think is going to be South Africa's next big thing in terms of motorsports?
Or as adding to that, what do you think needs to change?
Yeah, I'm still flabbergasted as to the amount of people that race in terms of countries' political, economic status versus the rest of the world. It's just really.
It's a disease.
On paper,
I mean, it's not
it
something
doesn't
you-
seem like
No.
we should be racing.
We
To be
shouldn't,
honest.
absolutely not. So, not to choose any size, but I mean, you've got oval track racing is a very good example. They've got MSA, which runs most, and then they've got this new thing, WUMSA, and the guy in charge of WUMSA, Ishmael Peck, is passionate, and he's a passionate oval guy, and he's grown the numbers. Just the right guy with the right attitude has grown the numbers in leaps and bounds. So I think people are almost more important.
Passion is underrated. Passion is the thing that builds
Absolutely,
motorsport.
yeah.
I've seen it, and even with karting and stuff, where I was persuaded for at least 6 or 10 races in my karting career, where I was really not feeling it. I was kind of too busy, and I was convinced by one of my competitors. It's like, come on, we can do it. Let's get a big grid there. Just the passion is contagious, and you're like, I don't want to drop the team. I want to be part of it. And you're tired. You're not really fit, but you go and do it because there's that passion.
Absolutely.
And that's contagious. So I think that helps build the grid.
And the key thing, I think, and I always harp on this, I've done this on many times with various platforms on talking about sponsorships and all kinds of stuff. But I think the key thing is rule stability. Rule stability is key.
Okay.
If you have a set of rules for a Class A category and you have it cast in stone for 5 or 10 years, it'll always work. But as soon as you chop and change rules, that's when there's infighting, politics, numbers dwindle, that kind of stuff. So, and then I still maintain, we have NASCAR works in America. It works very well. They've tried it across the world, and it actually doesn't work.
Yeah.
Australia have their things sorted out. Germany has their German touring cars. England has their thing. I still think we're lacking our thing.
Our thing, yeah.
And
Spinning isn't it?
no, I think if you look at the demographics and the car sales and stuff like that, I still think we need a one-make Bucky series. So something that
that's the idea.
attracts because the bulk of the market out there is, if you look at car sales, everyone's got a
Everyone's
Toyota
got a
Bucky and
Bucky, yeah.
Amarok, and I still think that'll be something unique to South Africa, and it'll work better here than it'll work in any other country.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
Or one big taxi series. I don't know. Taxi racing.
It'll also work, yeah, absolutely.
There's no way that'll happen without cheating. I'm sorry.
Bucky racing, I think, is I mean, the Australians have some truck things and whatever, but
Yeah.
for us it needs to be almost, I almost want to say we almost need a Group N kind of bucky racing, right?
yes,
So you
yes.
need a Hilux with the steel wheels. They just need to add some safety things, add a cage in it, and maybe just tweak the suspension a little bit, just drop it a little bit and have somebody sponsor the tires.
Yeah, and get dealer teams, Toyota,
Yes.
Toyota of whatever little town
Yes.
get involved,
Bullford
will
or
get
Bristol.
involved in the local Ford dealer in wherever, so.
But it needs to be, the budget needs to be so that you could have Kuruman Toyota or
Involved.
the R, Ford to sponsor a
100%,
bucky, so it doesn't cost them $2 million to run the thing.
Yeah.
So in essence, Nissan, Toyota, Ford, VW. If you're listening to this,
Haval, GWM,
Chevy.
all these new guys, Kia, whoever's listening, whoever has a bucky.
Even Peugeot's got a bucky now.
Peugeot's got a bucky, Fiat's got a bucky.
Yeah,
I mean, they won't finish the race, but...
that would be good.
What, Peugeot?
Yeah.
So you obviously have lots of guys coming in here wanting to get into racing. What would you say is probably the single biggest mistake that everyone makes? Because obviously we have Google these days. Everyone goes and researches stuff, and then they come in here with their own ideas of what they need and what they should do.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, most people come in here, and again, the guys that start out racing, again, Cape Town probably more than maybe up north, the guys are looking for entry level, the basic stuff that they can get. My first thing to them is, what are you going to race? And the guy says, it's an oval track car or a Clubman's car or a GTI Challenge. And my first thing to him is, have you tried golf? Have you tried tennis? Have you tried? Are you sure?
Are you sure you want to do this?
Do you know what you're getting yourself into?
You are the worst cocaine salesman in the world.
And that's actually what I tell folks as well is, if you can be part of a Lemons team or rent a car or try and get that experience without having to buy the car and everything. Yes, there's some minimal kit, but even if you can borrow something,
100%.
try and do it and see if you like it. Because if you discover you don't like it, which is impossible. I mean, come on, who's not going to love racing? But if you don't love racing, then
We've even we've made some suits up as a rental thing. So a guy wants to rent a race suit, because he doesn't want to spend 2 or 3 or 4,000 rand. Well, rent one for $100 for the weekend, and just see, So
or you do 2 races a year, and it actually works out better.
It works out better, yeah. The big thing is it's unbelievable, from a 4-year-old kid to whatever age or gender. Every single person that comes in here that starts racing starts for exactly the same reason, to have fun.
yeah.
Everyone. And especially if there's a wife or a spouse with it, I'll say, just remind that guy in 3 months' time and in 6 months' time
That
and a
he said
year's
it was
time
for fun.
why you started this
Yeah,
thing.
that's
Because
very
I
true.
see people, and it's sad, you see people that come in here, they're all excited, and you see them 2 months later at the racetrack, and the guy's upset, throwing his tools, because he's now this happened,
stressed.
and this guy's beat him, so he's going to spend 20,000 rand modifying his engine, and that's not why he started out.
I
So
mean,
no one's going to become a Formula One driver. That's the reality. No one's going to become a Formula One. So you might as well, as old, what's his name?
The chances of your kid winning the lotto is better than becoming a Formula 1 driver.
100%. Yeah, you might as well have fun.
I've seen some guys who go down a rabbit hole and it becomes kind of like a gambling addiction. I mean, these guys...
I don't know what you're talking about.
They spend money that they don't have to try and win races that don't really mean anything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When they started off, as you say, just trying to have
those
fun.
plastic trophies are cool, man. They're underrated.
and the funny thing is, like, with karting especially, as soon as because there's an inclination to be the wealthier people that take part, and when it's kids involved, and when you have a non-racing family, a dad that knows the pitfalls of motor racing, that's the worst.
Yes.
And then because little Johnny's going to be the next Formula One driver, so, and that's maybe worth 100 or 200 million rand. Well, I've got news for him. It ain't
That's all
even
gonna be
close
done.
enough,
Yeah.
So, by the
need
time you get
longer.
to the UK and you start doing Formula 3 and Formula 2, that's crazy money, So,
Well, what they don't understand, just getting to be the South African champion in karting is already
it's going to take a few
big money,
few bucks,
many digits, not
Yes,
5 digits.
No, for sure.
Six
For sure,
digits, maybe 7.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Yeah.
And no, definitely. I mean, but it's interesting because I mean, they were in some of your racing. I'm sure you were a bit more serious at it, and some championships and things where you compete in where you do get more serious. You practice harder. You do things, and there is a certain. There was a time when I was fit, you wouldn't say it now, and really in racing I had a...
Well, you are old, so it could have been like 100 years.
Yeah, could be. So, I mean, we had a bike and net assist, I was fit, I was driving, I was doing almost 200 laps a week in a cart.
In a cart.
In a DD2 cart.
That's
I did
a lot.
all the nationals, all the regionals, and when you are that, like, you know, into it, you spend on it a lot, but you are in it, and, you know, there's a certain satisfaction from
it,
doing well and from doing a certain lap time and stuff. But there comes a time where you just need to step back and say, okay, and this, you know, is this weighing up against the fun factor and what it actually costs, you know?
Yeah.
And actually with COVID forced me into that. Yeah. Where before COVID I was like, super into it, and I was getting ready for the next national in Natal in KZN. And then COVID happened, and I kind of took a step back, and I'm like, you know what? Actually, maybe I'll rethink what I'll do with my money.
Sometimes you need that wake-up call, reality check.
It's one of the silver linings that came from that, as I was like,
So what we're hearing kind of is Andre was worth 200 million rand before COVID. And now he's gone broke and recuperated a bit. On that bombshell.
We can neither confirm nor deny these rumors. But speaking of addictions and problems associated with racing, I assume that you probably have a fairly similar problem to us lot, which is that you accumulate cars and run out of space. How many cars do you currently have?
Which race course do you currently have?
Or is this not something that can be publicly announced because you might cause divorces?
Fortunately, with my son racing overseas, it's lightened my pockets, and we've got rid of some stuff. So I've still got
the funds have been reallocated.
Yes, yeah. Okay. So I've still got my Chevy, which I've had since I was 19 years old, which I'll never sell. There's a Toyota race bucky, which a friend of mine's about to buy from me. Then there's some carts. My son has still got some dirt carts which we got from America, but the biggest problem is parts. I've got stuff that I've accumulated over years, so and that adds up. So we've got this new little thing across the road. We call it our Carrick Bazaar. We've got this mark tables, and we've put stuff, and it's very cool. I love the idea. The one table's got a big yellow sticker, and everything on the table is 25 rand. The next table is $50. The next table is $100. So, and some of the stuff is 20,000 rand, but it's on a 200 rand table because I've just got so much stuff that I'll never in my life use. So with the link of the race suits, I was very fortunate to be in touch with all the race teams and factory teams back in the day, touring cars. So I bought Opel Motorsport. I bought the Vectras when they shut down, and I bought all the Nissans from Glenore when the Primeras when they started.
A bunch of Toyotas
and BMs and
the Run X's that you bought like a bunch of them.
So I don't know if it's good or bad, but knowing all these guys, so there comes a time motorsport, and that's worldwide. The same happens with NASCAR, where something has an intricate value, and they have it refocused. They're going off-road racing now. And suddenly overnight, that stuff is in the way.
Somebody makes a decision in a boardroom and says, we're going rallying, we're now stopping with the circuit racing, and then suddenly, you know.
All of that stuff is in the way.
And I've had a great relationship with Glenn Hall all the years, and that was so funny because we always used to get stuff, and I used to buy stuff from him. And last year, he said to me, he's clearing out and cleaning out, and there's quite a lot of stuff here. Can you come grab this lot of stuff? So I said, yeah, sure, I'll take it, There's never a list, because if there's a list, they'll know what the value is. You don't want them to have a list. And you don't ask questions. You take the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I sent a guy up.
It's like a big lucky pack.
Yes, it's a big lucky pack. And he had an Interlink truck. And I said, I'll just stop there on the way back. He said, it's fine, I'm coming down empty. So he phoned me. He said, okay, well, there's 17 tons loaded, and there's still some stuff here. I can't fit it in the truck. Oops. So that happens. Hence the market table idea is just to try and get some relieve the parts. And what happens is, a guy walks in and sees some part for a Toyota or a VW that's an ex-touring car, ex-rally part, and he desperately needs it, and that completes his puzzle.
Yeah.
You know, that's my biggest
It
focus.
actually elevates his package to
100%.
This is now got
So
brilliant
my
brakes.
core thing in with racing is I try and get as many people onto the track.
Yeah.
If I can help a guy, if I can give a guy something free that I don't know, and it gets him to race, great. Because
His car is there. He needs to buy.
he needs
brake
a race
fluid.
suit. He needs a
race
race
suit.
you know. So
Yeah.
the more people we get on the track, it's the same with tires. You know, if there's a tire wall, it's something that's a disposable item. Tires is a big cost. You know, if there should be a big tire wall, great. You know, Dunlop has been great. They've come to the party. There was always a shortage of tires. Guys are battling, and Dunlop have stepped up, and they've just got stock in all the sizes. Tires are affordable. But those kind of things, you know, it what helps racing. You've got to step it up, you know. So anything to get more guys on the track.
I must say on the racing front, you know, in the early days when you started, you know, the manufacturers were heavily involved, right? I mean, they had Group N cars, modified cars, you know, everything you can think of. And I must say, you know, Volkswagen and Toyota, I mean, they must give them some credit at the moment.
Absolutely.
They are doing big things, still putting big money. And even, you know, GR Toyota with the karting stuff they're sponsoring and you know, really making a difference in motorsport.
Yeah.
And obviously Volkswagen with all the Polo Cups and all these things.
Yeah.
I mean, I
hats
think
off to them.
if more
Absolutely.
manufacturers would get involved in such a way, I think, you know, it would be good for them.
No, it's sad because, you know, you will see a brand from wherever, without mentioning a name, not Toyota or not VW, and you see these guys are spending 500,000 rand on a golf day. I think, come on, man.
It's like,
You
come
know,
on, man.
you know,
And it's a
spend the
motoring
money,
brand,
you know,
right?
it's a motoring brand.
Put it in
absolutely.
motoring, yeah,
Put it in
exactly.
motoring. They're sponsoring a road race, athletics. Not that.
Yeah, or a
that's
fancy
wrong,
party or
a party,
something,
but-
you know, or a nightclub or something.
And then you'll get the problem is that one bean counter that's just anti-motor racing. You know,
Yeah.
sees it as a waste. You know.
Or it's not a PR, it's not green enough for
Green,
it.
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, and that's where back to the Americans. That's where they're good at it. You know, they see the value of that. And you talk to those guys with those radiators, and they go, "Well, why don't you use a radiator twice?" I mean, they build a new car almost or they do for every race. And the guy goes, "You know, it's $8,000 radiator," and he goes, "Well, no. If there is that small little pinhole that nobody picks up, and do another race, and he's leading, and let's say it's a Ford, and the engine blows because the radiator's sprung a leak. The damage it does to the blue oval times so many people watching is worth that much money. No ways, we'll put a brand new radiator. It's not worth it.
It's a different set of
It's a
sums that they
very
are
cheap
doing. Right?
$8,000 radiator.
Absolutely.
It's a different set of sums that they're doing. Like the Formula One guys as well. I mean, they spend millions on that car for every race, just in case if something's not perfect, then you're
Well, the thing
lost.
is, it would really get up your nose if, I mean, it was Carroll Shelby who said it when they went racing in the 24 hours. He says, you know, you go there, you spend all the money to get the car there, and a 5-cent washer fails.
Yeah.
And then the whole weekend is gone.
Yeah. I mean, I did that with the karting when I did the nationals and stuff. You travel to Natal, Swartkops, all these places. I mean, you go there, and if, let's say, your steering column bends or your starter breaks or something, now suddenly it's a $5,000 or a $10,000 thing. Not spending that money is more expensive. Right?
Absolutely,
Because it means that you're
50,000
paying
rand,
all this money to go there, and you only do one race instead of three. So if you're not getting the full enjoyment, the cost per lap is much more. Yeah. So you have to, if you're that invested, you have to make sure you're on the grid. Otherwise, it's.
I mean, in NASCAR, again, I'm keep on going back to NASCAR, but the Roush guys that do the engines for the Fords, I mean, they have, the 1 year I was there was 11 Fords in the grid in Cup racing, and they'd build, so every race they build an engine for that race because it's you know, some tracks are tight. So they got a tolerance that they can blueprint when they need a little bit more torque or they need a little bit more this. And they'd build an engine for every one of the 11 cars, and then they'd build a spare engine for every one of the 11 cars. And then they always 3 race, because they do, I think it's 36 or 38 races a year. And they're always 3 races ahead with the engine program.
It's like the backlog of engines.
Yeah, and then they'll build, so if it's 22 engines, so they'll build a 23rd engine, always. And then they've got 12 engine dynos. And then they've got a room there, which is one of only 2 in America, which is a fancy dyno / simulator. They'll put this engine on this machine, and it'll run the race. they'll factor in the temperature,
Engine braking, the everything.
the braking. It'll do its pit stops,
Temperature.
everything. They go back 5 years and they look how many cautions they had, and the engine will caution, and they'll run the race. And then if that engine breaks the dyno, well, guess what? The other two will also break. Because they replicate
It's a
into
real world
that
simulation.
absolute real world situation. And now you've got, then people go, you say to people it's a push rod engine, 2 valve per cylinder push, it rests 10,000 RPM. They go, for 500 miles. How the hell is that possible? Well, that's why, because the rest of everything built it properly.
And tested.
And they've got a 0.1, at the time, it's probably less now, they've got a 0.1% engine failure. 1 in 1,000. Wow. Push rod engine at rest 10,000 RPM. I mean, it's amazing,
That's less than Formula One, feels like.
Yeah.
Much.
Yeah,
but also, it's kind of tricky to make it rev like that. But it's also relatively simple, right? I mean, if the few moving parts are top and they, that is what they are. With a Formula One car, I mean, there's a gazillion things that can go wrong. And there's the electric stuff and the hybrid this and the,
Yeah, that's just a whole different kettle of fish.
But listen.
Anyway, guys, I think we're running out of time. Gunter, thanks for that. We will definitely do another show with you. This has been fun. I think we need to talk some more racing stories.
Yeah. Want some stories from the golden years.
But until next time.
Stay classy, San Diego.
There we go.
Cool.
Yeah.
Lekker,